From filmmaker Bob Clark comes the 1974 Christmas slasher movie that many would consider to be the pinnacle of its respective subgenre. Filled to the brim with classic Christmas ambiance, some truly creepy moments, and an atmosphere that is absolutely intoxicating for the viewer. Let's take a look at Black Christmas. Black Christmas is one of those 70s slasher movies that I first saw as a kid. Not as young as I was when I first started watching Freddy, Jason, or Leatherface movies, but perhaps since the age of 10 or 11 or so, which is actually years after I first started watching the others. And since I've literally been watching horror movies since my inception, you can probably already see how much my landscape of horror would have already been carved out by the time I finally saw Black Christmas. I remember seeing it at Videoland and places like Movie Gallery for years, but I, for whatever reason, never bothered to rent it, and it wasn't really the type of horror movie my mom really would have went out of her way to rent for herself, so there was never really a natural exposure to the film until I decided to grab it back in '97 or so. Not just out of sheer exhausted curiosity, but it was finally one of the few horror movies on shelves I still had not rented. I remember the presentation of the VHS tape to be extremely rough. The tape wasn't in great condition, the image on the screen looked damaged and like it had been rewound 200,000 times, which I'm sure it had, but I still managed to be somewhat enthralled with the film, on a visual level at least. If we're being honest, I think I found the film itself to be a bit slow back then, but the visuals and the vibe and the atmosphere really hit hard for me in the initial watch. So while it didn't become an instant classic for me, at least at that time, I knew I would need to see it again at some point down the road.
You big cunt. You big gun. Let me lick it.
Black Christmas tells the story of a group of sorority sisters who begin receiving anonymous, salacious phone calls, which quickly become threatening in nature. After one of the sorority girls goes missing, and the dead body of a dead high school girl is coincidentally found, the sorority girls and the police soon find themselves in the midst of a rampage, and at the mercy of a deranged serial killer with a terrifying and tumultuous past, and who just might be a bit closer than anyone thinks. By the time the film concludes, we aren't left with any real sense of relief, and the looming feeling of dread is so thick that it could be cut with a knife. Ambiguous, ominous, and quietly creepy. Looking back at those VHS days in my initial viewing of the film, I actually don't recall ever watching the film again until its more recent Scream Factory release, which I didn't purchase until late 2017. And that's kind of weird to think about considering what an impact, visually at least, the film had on me as a kid. Again, I wasn't the biggest fan of the movie itself at the time, for whatever reason, but I did always have the inkling to watch the movie again. I just never got around to it, until said Scream Factory release. And after so many years of hearing how inspired John Carpenter was by the film when he was making Halloween, how much of an impact it had on the slasher subgenre as a whole, and how masterful of a horror film it was in general by a generation of kids my age who were finally seeing the film in their own time, I was absolutely filled with excitement at the prospect of finally seeing the film again. I don't know what really happened during that second rewatch, which was in and of itself 20 years in the making, But I really enjoyed almost every aspect of the film with that go-around, and I was sort of angry with myself for not reassessing the film earlier. Unsurprisingly, the visuals were just as fantastic as I remembered, if not better. The cinematography, the set design, the mood, and the atmosphere, all of that stuff still worked. The movie just exudes vibrancy when it comes to set decoration and visual tone and all that stuff. But I couldn't believe how many other aspects of the film I loved and hadn't before. The original score, the offbeat acting by many of the actors, the quiet creepiness of the story, how it's executed, and so on and so on. It just all worked for me with that second rewatch, and I loved every minute of it. And for a film that's just over 90 minutes in length, it sure does move quickly, feeling way shorter than its actual runtime, and much quicker than most 90-minute horror movies. And I feel weird saying that because of Black Christmas's loomingly slow sense of dread. It somehow still moves by very consistently, which I look at as a good thing. It means I'm invested in every single scene and every shot, and with every moment of the movie.
Agnes, it's me, Billy. Agnes, don't you tell what we did, Agnes.
All in all, Bob Clark's 1974 Christmas horror slasher, Black Christmas, is a dark and moody horror film, packed with Christmas ambiance, a thick sense of looming dread, and a quietly creepy story filled with memorable scenes and interesting characters. Olivia Hussey and Margot Kidder are great in the film as well, and John Saxon, as always, kicks all kinds of ass. I think his presence alone elevates any film he's in, am I right? And again, big props to the erratic and excellently creepy original score by Carl Zeitler, who, interestingly enough, also did the music for one of my favorite zombie movies of all time, Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things, as well as doing the music for A Christmas Story and contributing to the score for Prom Night, among many other titles. Just a little Carl Zeitler FYI for you. Bob Clark's Black Christmas is a masterpiece.